All right, so let's see if this is working properly on my end. Looks like it is. Let me just confirm it. There it is. Give me 1 sec. My mic might be super loud. All right, so let's. Oh yeah, my mic is super loud. Looks like it is. Let me just confirm it. Let's turn that down. Yeah, super loud mic. Give me 1 sec, guys. I'm just getting everything set up on my end, making sure that it's all working. If you watch this after the fact, there's a couple minutes here where I'm just setting things up. Give me 1 sec. My mic might be super loud. Oh. Yeah, sorry about the background noise there. I'm hearing it to test myself. That's still pretty loud. Okay. That should work. I think that'll be okay. If there are problems with the mic loudness, I have a new mic and my chair makes a lot of noise and I can't hear it. I have noise canceling headphones, which is fine, except for when I'm streaming and my chair creaks with the strain of the oldest church in Europe. But yeah, that's the whole thing for me. So I'm going to hold off for a couple minutes. The stream's not starting technically until 4:30, so I got a couple minutes. If you are here, awesome. I'd love to see you say hi in the chat. That way I can see who's here and who's not. Argent, nice. Next level stuff. Yeah, this is super high tier. All right, this is the craziest thing you'll see a teacher try and do, which is live stream review sessions 6 weeks out of the AP exam. Yeah, I'm very extra. Apologies about the chair squeaking, by the way. I got a new mic. It's very high quality. I cannot turn down the gain on the mic, so yeah, I'm going to try and stay perfectly still. Can I tell you about the song of the day? Yes, Snarky Puppy is a jazz collective, which is just the most terrifying thing to say to somebody in terms of music, from Denton, Texas, and went to the same college I went to. They have maybe the most insane drummer live right now. So I would check out the song, watch the video on YouTube for it. It's crazy. 10 minutes long, but it's so super rad. Tori, Judson, hello everybody. Hi everybody. Good to see you. I'll get started here in a minute or two. Fake name, you're fine. Steven, good to see you. Getting a bunch of people in here. This is awesome. Yeah, these videos will save after the fact, by the way, so if you can't stick around for the whole thing, all that stuff, yes, thank you, Vivian. I know the chair is the loudest thing ever. I'm so sorry. I cannot change that. I might just grab a not swivelly chair here in a second if it's terrible. If it's terrible, let me know. If it's too loud, if it's too much, just tell me. Because I will grab just a not swivel chair for these if I need to. Trying to think of anything else that's important to mention. Oh, right, Archer. The dog. You can see him kind of. Buddy. Archer, come here. Archer. Okay, I need to lift you up. I know you don't like it. Come here. No, don't flee. Okay, I guess you can see him on the chair kind of. Let me angle the camera a little bit better. No, other way. Nope. Tilt the computer screen. Oh, he's off camera. Wow. Not helpful. Yeah, we got people in the chat. Okay. All right, how are we doing on view? Okay, I'll take that. That'll work for now. Okay. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the first of what's hopefully going to be a lot, which great for me, of review sessions for AP Macroeconomics. Can I edit gain? I could not. I tried. It wouldn't, which is super cool. It wouldn't affect it, which I'll figure it out later, Judson. We'll figure it out. I'm going to turn down my mic a little bit to help, but I'm trying. Okay. So, welcome to the first of a bunch of review sessions. This one will be over some of the simpler stuff at the beginning of the course, initially the production possibilities curve, as well as comparative advantage, absolute advantage, and terms of trade. For those of you that are live, thank you for watching live. If you have any questions as I'm going, feel free to type them in the chat. If you think of a question later and you want to post it in the comments and I can respond to those, that works just fine. If you're one of my students, feel free to email me. That also works, but I prefer putting things like in the chat or in the comments. That way, more people can see that than just my students, because I might have people who are watching this who are not actively my kids, which is great. So, first things first. I am not going to hit on literally everything in the entire course in these live streams. That would be kind of insane. And I already did that in the 32 lecture videos I made where I cover the entirety of the course. So that would be redundant to do that again. This is meant to get your brain activated to remember some things that you have forgotten. This is not meant to be the first time you've learned a thing. This is meant to help you remember a thing that you, especially my first semester students, super forgot because it's been 6 to 7 months since we learned some of this stuff. So if you're a kid who's taking a class right now, great. This should be a relatively recent thing that you've learned. If you're a student who took it last semester, hopefully this helps you remember a bunch of stuff. The way I'm going to structure these is the first half of it, I'm just going to review the concepts in kind of a brief overview. I'm not going to go through a full PowerPoint or anything. I'm just going to more talk it out. I might draw stuff on a whiteboard, that kind of thing. And then I'm going to go through practice questions. Some multiple choice, some free response from AP exams previously, explain them. I picked some kind of brain teasery ones, some tricky ones, and I picked some ones that are straightforward. I'm going to go through all of those, explain how I figured out the answer, and hopefully that does a decent enough job of covering it. Ideally, it'll take an hour. This is the first one. I don't know. It might last longer. I apologize if it does. But I'm going to try and keep it at an hour. I'm going to do my best to hold myself back in terms of time. But yeah, these will be every Tuesday and Thursday. The only weird dates are next Thursday's one will be on Friday instead, because I'm getting the COVID vaccine next Thursday. And then there's a couple ones at the end on a Saturday and a Monday that are the right before the AP exam, covering my bases and making sure everybody's okay. All right. Before I get started, do I have any questions from the chat before I get started? All right. I know there's a delay, so there's a delay between me getting the chat and me seeing it on my screen, so it's about 20 seconds. So if I get a question from you and I take a while to respond to it, that's what's happened. All right. So first things first. Production possibilities curves. The first graph you learn in economics, the easiest graph you learn in economics, the graph that requires very little brain function to figure out. Here's your basic idea. Production possibilities curves tells us literally what production is possible for a country. It gives you two goods. It really simplifies it down into just two things. I'll say good X, good Y, and the amounts of those things that a country can produce, like this. It generally is shaped like this. It's shaped like it's an actual curve a lot of the time, but that isn't always a guarantee. The idea being, if they put all of their resources towards making good Y, they would be right there. If they put all of their resources towards good X, they would be at that dot. And they can make these other combinations of stuff, right? I'll just label these A, B, C, D, E, bang, like that. That's a production possibilities curve with some dots on it to sort of help you out, give you more of a visual, all that kind of stuff. Okay, now, with that, because it's like the most oversimplification of a thing we do in this entire class, because a country can produce two goods. It's it can produce more than two. We're just going to narrow it down to two to keep things simple. Here's what you got to know about the production possibilities curve. 1, shape. Bowed out curve most of the time. Looks like this most of the time. Reason being why it looks like this. A concept called increasing opportunity cost. The idea is, as I go from points A to B to C to D to E, you can kind of see based off my drawing, even though it's pretty sloppy, that as I go from A to B, B to C, C to D, and D to E, the amount of the Y value that I'm giving up, that I'm losing, is getting bigger. Right? If I had numbers here, going from A to B, it looks like I barely give up any, if any, of amounts of Y. B to C, I give up a little bit. C to D, more. D to E, a lot more. The idea is, as I produce more and more of good X here, I'm giving up a larger and larger and larger amount of good Y. Because in economics, at least from a production standpoint, two goods that are different are going to require different resources, right? If and I use dumb examples in class, like cakes and bicycles and stuff like that. If I'm making cakes and bikes as my two goods, I cannot use the same resources to make those two goods. That would be insane. That bike would be weirdly delicious. That cake would be terrifying. So you can't use the same resources for both goods, meaning there's going to be some inherent inefficiency moving from one good to the other, thereby causing the cost to progressively get more and more steep. That as I move from making cakes to making bikes, I'm giving up a larger and larger amount of my resources to make that pivot because it costs more to try and pivot away from one to the other. So that'll happen if you have two goods that are very different. You'll have increasing opportunity costs. Your graph will look like this. If your two goods, in this case X and Y, are very different goods that have very different resources, like cakes and bicycles. Crazy different stuff. If you have two goods that are pretty much the same, though, like, what would work for this example? Bikes and tricycles. Those use pretty much the same resources, it's just sort of less of them for tricycles. You should see a graph that looks a little bit different. Your graph shouldn't have increasing opportunity costs because you don't have that inherent inefficiency. You've got actually an inherent efficiency in building it because the two goods are the same. And your approach possibilities curve should be linear. It should look like that. The idea being, if I gave up one of one good to make some amount of the other good, that amount wouldn't ever really change. It would be like, I could make two tricycles for the amount of resource I used to make one bike. And that kind of would never change because they're made from very similar resources. The people who make bicycles could reasonably make tricycles, etc. So, first step of understanding PPC, shape. Either a bowed-out curve, if the two goods are really different, or a straight line, which is constant opportunity cost, if the two goods are very similar. Second thing, what the different squeaky chair, sorry. What the different parts of the graph represent. So the curve itself, this line that I've drawn, is all of the combinations they can make if their economy is at full employment. Basically, if they use all the resources effectively, if they're nailing it, they can make any combination along the curve. Any of those will work as long as they're crushing it. So the line itself, every point on there is efficient. It's all good. Just whatever good you want could depend on which point you're at, right? Like if I want all of my Y good, then I would be up here. If I only wanted my X good, I would be there. If I wanted to split it 50-50, I'd be there. Now, if you're in here, if you're for some reason at like a combination that's within the circle, that would be you producing less than you should. You're operating below full employment. In economics terms, this is effectively a recession, a period of time with a lot of unemployment where you're not really using your resources effectively. So if you've got an economy in a recession, it would be right there. And if you're outside of this curve, based on your current resources, you can't really be at this spot without it being like unsustainable. Like it possible, not really, given what you currently have. Based on your current level of resources, you really shouldn't be able to get to there. So there's your production possibilities curve kind of in a nutshell, where you've got, all right, this curve on the line is efficient. The curve is my maximum level of production. Want to be there. If we're doing poorly, there. If we're overdoing it, producing too much, going past what's sustainable, we could be there, but we probably don't have the resources to make that happen. So that's the second big thing with the production possibilities curve. And the last big thing with the production possibilities curve is what changes it. Like every other graph in the course, you've got to be aware of what can manipulate a graph, what can change it, what can cause you to move the line in some way, shape, or form, right? So for this one, it's pretty simple. My acronym that I use in class for this is QQTT, are the things that shift it. QQTT, bang, which is quantity and quality of resources. Those are the two Qs, quantity and quality of your resources, technology, and trade. Those four. So those four are your big things that'll cause the PPC to change, like the line itself moving, whether it's getting bigger or smaller, whether it's going out in one direction or both, will be based on those resources. So let's see. Suggestions from the chat. I need two goods that are very different. Can you guys give me a couple of goods as examples? I'll take a drink of water while I wait. Just give me two goods. Give me random ones. Just type. Give me some stuff. This is where the delay gets really awkward for me. Shoes and cupcakes. Toya, thank you so much. Much appreciated. That'll work. Shoes and cupcakes. Toilet paper. Love it. Let's do shoes and cupcakes. Those are two very different things. It's the first one I saw. And again, there's a delay, so apologies if you guys were typing a bunch of stuff and I only got to the first one. So shoes and cupcakes. All right. A thing that would affect this market, right? We're going to try and think shoes and cupcakes. Let's go quantity of resources. Shoes made from a lot of different things. Let's go with leather, right? There are shoes made of leather. Not common, but it does exist. So let's say that overall amounts of leather start going away, because let's say we're starting to use cows more for food and less for leather. I don't know. I'm giving you something weird. Less cows. There's less cows, so there's less leather. If there's less leather, then we can't make as many shoes. Less leather doesn't really affect my ability to make cupcakes, though. So my graph would probably do something like this, where the max amount of shoes I can make is decreasing. See, as my X value is now lowered, but my max amount of cupcakes ain't really changing because leather, sweet God, shouldn't be involved in your cupcakes. So that's the idea for your PPC. Is if it affects one of the two resources, cool, move that one. If it affects both, which I think the account thing actually would probably affect both, because most cupcakes use icing, and if I'm not mistaken, icing's sugar, but there's usually some dairy used in baking a lot of the time. That if there's like cows start like going away, that'll probably negatively impact cupcakes too, and decrease the overall curve itself. LJ, what do we got? Are these vegan cupcakes? Yes, that's kind of the thing I messed up with the initial thing. Like, are they vegan cupcakes? LJ, what's up? Got a lot of question marks, bud. All right. So for another example, if we're using the exact same thing, let's go with, I'm trying to think of something that would work in this example with the cupcakes and the shoes. Okay, there is a new production machinery in baking that allows for a faster process of baking cupcakes, right? That helps cupcakes, doesn't help shoes at all. This wouldn't hurt shoes, though. That's the thing that students kinda sometimes will lose track of. Where say we've got this faster, better baking process. Oh, look, you can see Archer right now. Good job, buddy. Trying to like not hide him. So faster, better cupcake making machine thing would improve cupcakes, wouldn't really affect shoes at all, which is why I'm not moving that left or right. Because remember, the curve itself is your max. And if we have better cupcake machinery, that doesn't affect my maximum amount of shoes I can make at all. If I'm just making shoes, I make the exact same amount of shoes. So those are all things that can cause your curve to shift. Q, Q, T, and T. The last one being trade, we'll come back to. It's in one of the FRQs. It's like a higher level question. But it's, and there's another higher level thing with PPCs that I put in one of the questions that I will explain when we get there. But in terms of your broad strokes overview of the production possibilities curve, that kind of covers it. It's a curve, shows how much of two things we can make. Oh, QQTT is quantity and quality of resources, technology, and trade. Those are my four things that shift the production possibilities curve. It's a nice, handy acronym to, would this change PPC? If it's Q, Q, T, or T, it should. Yeah, if it's changed to the quantity or quality of your resources, your technology, or your trade. Those are the big things. And the trade one we'll get to, because that one's a little bit complicated. All right. I'm trying to think of anything with production possibilities curves that I need to explain before I move on to absolute comparative advantage. Because we'll come to the FRQs and they'll hit on both of them. So the questions that I have will hit on both after I cover both. So any questions over production possibilities curves before I move to absolute and comparative advantage? And again, I need to change the delay in the chat. I think I can change that in my settings, actually. I don't think so. Okay. Just checking it. All right. So for absolute comparative advantage in terms of trade, this is the one that is usually a lot harder for students. This is the big thing in Unit 1 that causes people a lot of problems all the time. I will tell you now, the most important thing for absolute comparative advantage isn't math. It's definitions. If you know what absolute comparative advantage mean, you will have a lot easier time figuring it out. Because a lot of you guys like learn the math and don't understand the definition and always like mess up. Wait, is it the higher number or the lower number? I don't know. The biggest thing is understanding definition. So, absolute and comparative advantage have to do with how to tell who is better at producing something. They're just answers to the question, how do we tell who's better at making something? Absolute advantage is who can make the most of a thing given the same amount of resources. If I give Billy and Bobby the same amount of time, who can make the most? That's absolute advantage, okay? Whoever is making the most given the same amount of resources has the absolute advantage. So if I use a table that I'm gonna make up, which, man, it would have been smart to do that ahead of time, but I'm gonna use you guys in the chat. So I'm gonna use Koya, and I'm gonna use Vivian. And we're gonna use shoes and cupcakes again, because that was actually very easy. So Vivian and Koya can both make shoes and cupcakes. They are both cobblers and bakers. Good for them. Shout out to the ladies in the chat. Koya and Viv make shoes and cupcakes. Let's say Koya in a day can make 5 pairs of shoes. Vivian can make 10. Koya could make 10 cupcakes. Vivian could make, let's make that a little bit smaller. 5. Okay. So here's my table. These are the production possibilities. I am trying to see the camera, but I'm also blocking it to make it visible, so I'm just going to imagine you can see everything. Yes, you can. Okay, cool. So, Koya can make 5 shoes or 10 cupcakes. Vivian can make 10 shoes or 5 cupcakes. Oh my god. So different. All right. Absolute advantage is just who can make the most, given the same amount of resources. Cool. So, Koya's got the absolute advantage in cupcakes, and Vivian's got the absolute advantage in shoes, because Viv can make 10 shoes and Koya can make 5 shoes. On and on and on. That's absolute advantage. Absolute advantage, really, when you're doing a problem, shouldn't take you more than about 5 seconds to figure out, because it's just who can make the most given the same amount of resources, right? The only time it gets tricky for students when it comes to this is when the AP exam and economics as a whole changes up the wording on people. Where instead of it being Koya can make 5 shoes in a day, let's say it takes Koya 5 days to make a shoe and Vivian 10 days to make a shoe. So I'm changing the units. It's still shoes and cupcakes they're making. I'm just saying it takes 5 days for Koya to make a pair of shoes and Vivian 10 days to make a pair of shoes. Absolute advantage is still if I gave them the same amount of resources, who would produce more. But if I say that statement again and I'm reading this table with the days in it, Koya would have the absolute advantage in shoes now. Because it takes her less time to make a pair. If I gave her and Viv the same amount of time, then Koya would actually make more of them. So when I switched up the wording, when I changed up what the numbers in the table represented, it does change the answer. And that gets you to the big catch for absolute and comparative advantage problems, which is that there are output problems and there are input problems. But I can feel my students' anxiety through the screen on when I say those words, because this is the thing that got students a lot on the actual absolute comparative advantage thing. Is it input or output? Output problems are problems in which the numbers you're given in the table are the number of things being made. Like when I said this is Koya can make 5 shoes and Vivian can make 10 shoes. That's numbers in the table, number of shoes being made in a day. That's it. It's output, things being put out to sell. So in that situation, bigger number 1. Vivian could make more, she had the absolute advantage. An input problem gives you the numbers in the table are the amount of resources used to make a thing. Like when I changed it to days. The amount of days to make a pair of shoes, the amount of days to make a thing of cupcakes. When I changed it to days, I flipped what we were talking about. We weren't talking about the product, we were talking about a resource. Why that matters is, I want the person who can make the most of the product. I also want the person who would use the fewest resource. So what I'm looking at for that is I'm wanting to make sure that if I'm using absolute advantage, I know if I'm looking for the higher or the lower number, which it should still be read the table, read what it's saying. It's still going to be kind of obvious. It's just obvious in a different way. I would want the person who can make the most. So if I see number of shoes made and it's 5 and 10, I would want the person who can make 10. If I see the resources, I would want whoever uses the least. So if I see it takes 5 days for Koya to make a thing of shoes and it takes Vivian 10 days to make a thing of shoes, I'd rather have Koya do it because it's the same shoes. She's just faster. So when you're doing it, like when you're going through an absolute advantage problem, if it's input or output, you shouldn't have to think too much about it. Just look at the table and see who you think is better based off of logic, where it's like, okay, this person uses less resources, them. This person makes more of the thing, them. Absolute advantage still will not require you to do any math. None. No math is needed for absolute advantage. Comparative advantage does require math. So let me show you that one. I'm going to use the same table. I do not know why I erased it. That is not helpful for me. Koya, Vivian, shoes, cupcakes. I'm actually going to flip the table because I wrote it in a way that I don't normally write it. Koya made 5 shoes. Vivian made 10, and then 10 and 5. Okay, so I'm using this. I flipped it so that I could deal with it the way that I usually solve it, which is in this format. So I got Koya's up top, Vivian's down below. It's the same table as before. I am starting this with its shoes and cupcakes here, not days. So, definition. Again, definitions are the big thing here. For absolute, it's who can make the most given the same amount of resources. Comparative advantage, different, is who can produce the good at the lowest opportunity cost. Who can make it at a lower cost than the other, is the idea. Who can make it at a lower opportunity cost. Now, what that boils down to is I have to figure out what the opportunity cost of each of these people making one of their good is. So I've got to figure out, for Koya, every time she makes a thing of shoes, how many cupcakes could she have made instead, and the same thing for Vivian. And then compare to see who's at the lower opportunity cost. So I can try to figure out what the opportunity cost of one shoe is for each of them. From a technical math standpoint, what I'm doing is I'm setting both sides equal to each other and then solving for shoes. I'm solving for one on each side. From like a simplified standpoint, the easiest way to think about this is if it's an output problem, which is what this is, I will do OGO. Other goes over. So what I'm going to do is to find the opportunity cost of one shoe for Koya, I'm going to take the other number, 10, and it goes over my current number, 5. 10 over 5, solve, it's 2. Meaning, every time Koya made a thing of shoes, she could have made 2 things of cupcakes. It feels weird to like say that the cost of a shoe is 2 cupcakes. Yeah, that feels weird. It's going to feel weird the whole time with absolute comparative advantage. It just means instead of making this, they could have made that. So every time they make this, they gave up the opportunity to have made that, if that makes sense. For Vivian, same idea. I take the other number, 5. It goes over my current number, 10. 5 over 10 is 1/2. Meaning every time Vivian makes a shoe, she gave up a half a thing of cupcakes. Comparative advantage is just who has the lower opportunity cost, which would be Vivian. Because instead of giving up 2 cupcakes for every one, she's giving up a half of a cupcake for every one. It's a lower cost deal for her. For the cupcakes side of this thing, I'm going to do the exact same thing. Opportunity cost of 1 cupcake, other goes over, is a half, and then 2. It flipped this time because I used 10 and 5, so it's just going to flip. And Koya would have the comparative advantage in cupcakes. Now, big things that are important here. And I'll hold this up in case you want to just like jot it down. Yes, you can see it. Okay. The big important stuff here from like a what the heck is going on standpoint is I am trying to figure out in as many different ways as I can who's better at producing it. Absolute advantage is figuring it out fast and easy and not really processing too much of like, they can make more, them. It's like, yeah, but if we just left it all up to who can make the most of a thing, there'd be a lot of like countries out there that don't have anything to produce because they can't make more than a bunch of other places. Like there's a bunch of small countries out there that can't compete with other countries from a raw number production standpoint. They don't have the land, they don't have the people, they don't have the tech, whatever. They still make stuff though. Why? Because they can make it at a lower opportunity cost. Because while we're huge as a country, America, we can make a bunch of stuff. So whenever we choose to make one thing, we've given up a lot of other options. We could have made a bunch of other stuff, and we chose not to. If you're a smaller country, you have fewer other options, so it can actually be more efficient for you to make the good as a small country because you're giving up less of other things. You have a lower opportunity cost. Now, if it's an input problem, you do solve it a little bit differently. For an input problem, as opposed to doing other goes over, you do other goes under. You take the other column's number and it goes under your column's number. Still set up as a fraction. You solve it, it's still lower opportunity cost. It's just you're plugging in a little bit differently. The logic there makes sense when you solve through it. If you need more detail on that, feel free to watch my full comparative advantage video where I go through like 15 examples of it and I explain it so much. But the basic idea is it's always lower opportunity cost. However you go about solving it, it'll be other goes over if it's output, other goes under if it's input. Solve, find who has the lower opportunity cost. That'll tell you comparative advantage. You almost always have to do some math for comparative advantage. If you have really good math brain is what I call it, where you're just like a person who does a lot of mental math a lot of the time, you might not need to write it down. But even me, and I'm pretty good at math, I make tables. I make tables in my class. And I write it out like this specifically, this 1S for 2C, 1C for 1/2 S. That is important for what we're going to do here in a second. In terms of last tips and tricks for comparative advantage, there are a couple other big ones that are important to mention. Your opportunity costs, like there and there, there and there, will always be reciprocals. So if it cost her 2 cupcakes per shoe, it's going to cost her a half a shoe per cupcake. That's just how solving things when you set them equal to each other is going to work out, but they'll always be reciprocals. So no matter what I get, if I got the opportunity cost of 1 shoe is 6 cupcakes, then the opportunity cost of cupcake would be 1/6 of a shoe. It's always going to flip like that. If I get 4/3 on one, it'll be 3/4 on the other. I'm always flipping the fraction for the other opportunity cost. The second thing, which is tied to that first thing, is that because of that, you, and this is important, I'm going to say it closer to the mic even though it's going to be louder, you cannot have a comparative advantage in both. Can't. Because of the reciprocal thing. If you had a lower number in one column, it's going to be bigger in the other because we're taking reciprocals. So Koya and Vivian, neither of them could have had the comparative advantage in shoes and cupcakes. It was one or the other. Can't have it in both. It's impossible. Neither of them could have the advantage if they had the same opportunity costs. But you can't have the comparative advantage in both. Impossible. Cool. All right. That's absolute comparative advantage. I'm going to do terms of trade next, and then we're going to go to practice problems. Questions over absolute comparative advantage. Give you guys time for that, and I'm going to set up a term of trade problem. Okay, so I'm setting up another problem here for terms of trade. I haven't seen any questions yet, so I'm not going to rush ahead of it. But I'm going to use countries because for most part, for terms of trade, we will use countries. But be aware, AP exam hates you, so they're just going to pick like random stuff. They might say like, Billy and Joe are trying to trade. And it's like, just say they're swapping stuff. Okay, so I've got a new setup here, new problem. U.S. and Mexico can make, and I used your guys' examples, Arjun, so this is your time to shine here. Toilet paper and computers. These are the two things that America and Mexico make. They're the only two goods these two countries make. That's it. Just accept it. America, in a day, can make 100 tons of toilet paper, Mexico can make 50 tons of toilet paper. America can make 25 computers. Yep, we're not good at it. And Mexico can make 10 computers. So as a quick review to yourself, trying to think, okay, who's got the absolute advantage in each of these? All right, I think America can make more toilet paper than Mexico, so them, and then they can make more computers than Mexico, so still them. So America's got the absolute advantage in both. Now, terms of trade is the last thing to this. It's the hard thing for a lot of my students in figuring out and then not forgetting how to do it, which is the problem that I think a lot of them are facing right now. Terms of trade is based around the idea that if you got two entities that can make a thing, one of them is going to have the comparative advantage in one, the other is going to have a comparative advantage in the other. There is a possibility that both sides can benefit from a trade as long as it falls in between their opportunity costs. If it does, if they've got a trade that's there, then both sides can be benefiting. They can both be made better off if they decide to specialize in the good they have a comparative advantage in and trade for the other. So again, in brief summary, terms of trade is there's a trade possibility between two countries that exists where if each country specializes in what they have a comparative advantage in and trades for the other thing, there is a sweet spot right in between their opportunity costs that could get them a mutually beneficial trade. That could get them exactly where they want to be. So I got these two countries. Now what I said was it has to be between their opportunity costs, so I have to find their opportunity costs again. So for America, where it's toilet paper and computers, the opportunity cost of one toilet paper would be, there goes over, a quarter of a computer. That would be 4. For Mexico, the opportunity cost of one toilet paper would be a fifth of a computer, and that would be 5. So here are my opportunity costs. For US, the opportunity cost of one toilet paper would be a quarter of a computer. Opportunity cost of one computer would be 4 things of toilet paper, and the Mexico's was 1/5 and 5. I can tell that Mexico has the comparative advantage in toilet paper because a fifth is less than a quarter, and that America's got it in computers because 4 is less than 5. It's all background stuff, but it is helpful. Now, if a question asks me, hey, what would be a mutually beneficial trade for one computer? What's a possible trade for one computer that would help out both sides? Trying to solve for whatever that's going to be. The way I figure it out is I grab the thing that looks like this, the trades they were doing before, which are these ones. Sorry, my phone is not silent. Apologize for that. I look at the opportunity costs from before, and I pick a number in between them. I usually, in my class, I set it up as a range. Let me grab another marker to make this a little bit clearer. I set it up as like, this marker's dead. Garbage. That one's not. I set it up as a range like this. Build it out like that. That's how I set it up. And I know it's going to fall between 4 and 5. So any number between 4 and 5 will work. I'll use 4.5 for this as an example. And then I'll go through it logically to explain how that's good for both sides. Because like, shortcut, it just has to be between the opportunity costs. Just pick a number between the opportunity costs. That'll save you time. If they ask you to explain it, because the AP exam might ask you to explain it, what's happening? Okay, so America, in this situation, we said would specialize in computers, or has the comparative advantage in computers, so they should make computers, theoretically. Meaning this trade is one computer from America for 4.5 ton, or 4.5 toilet paper from Mexico. All right. America used to give up one computer for 4 toilet paper. Now they're sending one computer to Mexico for 4.5 things of toilet paper. That's a win for America. They're getting an extra half ton of toilet paper. That's a win. Compared to what they were doing before, they are actually getting more toilet paper per computer based on the trade. Now, what people tend to freak out about is like, well, then isn't Mexico getting less? You got to think what Mexico's giving up. Remember, Mexico is comparative advantage in toilet paper, meaning they should specialize in that. So Mexico is actually making the toilet paper in that trade. I'm going to use circle for America, box for Mexico. So when I'm looking at it like this, I don't want to focus on the fact that they aren't getting as much TP for computers because they're not giving up computers. They're giving up toilet paper. They used to give up 5 toilet paper for every 1 computer. Now they're sending 4.5 things of toilet paper to America for 1 computer. They're getting a better deal. They're giving up a half ton less of toilet paper. And this is the part of terms of trade that I think is probably the hardest for a lot of students to grab, is like, when we're talking about a mutually beneficial trade, it's not that both sides are getting more, it's that one side is getting more and the other side is giving up less. That's how these terms of trade end up working out 9 times out of 10, is that America here is getting an extra half ton. Mexico is still getting 1 computer. They're not getting more, but they are giving up less, which is still beneficial for them. Because they used to give up 5 for 1, now they're giving up 4.5 for 1. That's a good deal for them. In case you're forgetting how I figured that out, it is based on comparative advantage. So America had the comparative advantage in computers, so I know they're the one trading computers here. Mexico has the comparative advantage in toilet paper, so I know they're the ones giving up the toilet paper here. Because when it comes to terms of trade, you specialize in what you have a comparative advantage in, and then trade for the other thing. No, don't let someone's car alarm be going off while they're just being annoying outside. Because I'm sure my mic can pick up on the car going on outside. Okay, that is terms of trade. The idea that I grab my opportunity cost, it needs to be right in between the two. If they don't ask you to explain it, that makes it really simple. It just has to be between them. It would be weird if it was for this one, 1/4 and 1/5. That would be kind of annoying. I have to pick a number between 1/4 and 1/5. 1/4.5 would work. I would probably just do decimals, where 0.25 is 1/4, 0.2 is 1/5, so 0.22 would work. But they'll usually use the whole number because it's easier to deal with, and they might give you a bigger range than this to make it a little easier to think of a trade. But any number in between the two is fine. If it's not in between the two, it might hurt one of the countries. Like if I said this was 6 instead, if they asked, hey, is a trade of 1 for 6 good for both? Short version, no. But it is good for America, because America used to give up 1 for 4, now they're giving up 1 for 6. This is a sick deal for the United States. It's terrible for Mexico, because Mexico used to give up 5 for 1, and is now giving up 6 for 1. Cool. All right. Questions over that, because that's the hardest thing for today. And I'm going to pull up the practice questions that I want to use for today. And then that's it. I'm going to these practice questions, and that should be the review. Let me grab the practice questions, and if you got questions, feel free to throw them in the chat. If you post them in the comments, I won't see them while the video is happening, but I will get to them after the video. And if you're watching this on a delay or watching this later, feel free to post a question in the comments. If you want to timestamp which part of the video you are referencing in the question, that would be super helpful. Really would appreciate that. If you're live, you can just ask, whatever. That's kind of the whole, that's the whole like nice thing with doing it live. While I'm waiting to see if you guys have any questions. Archer, do you want to appear on camera? Come here. Come here. What, now? Now you're too proud? Come here, Archer. Come on. He knows I'm going to lift him up. He absolutely hates being carried. So I think he knows what's about to happen. Come on. No. Nope, he's moved to the other couch, but now you can see him. Perfect. That worked out great, actually. There he is. I'm moving myself out of focus more so that you can see my dog in the background. Okay, don't see any questions, so now I'm going to move on to the actual... I would say this is the most useful part of it for those of you guys that think you have stuff down pretty well and just want to make sure that you're not going to mess up any questions. This is probably the big thing for today. So, make myself a little bit bigger so that you guys can see what I'm talking about. I'll also make this a little bit bigger so that you guys can read what the heck is happening on here. Extra large. Oh yeah, that's much more readable. Okay, so a few of these questions might seem familiar to some of you guys in my class because I use a couple of them on the tests or on the reviews. So if you see questions that you're like, oh yeah, this one, yeah, okay. All right, so this diagram right here. We've got a production possibilities curve. We've got amount of good Y. They can make 40 is their max, 30, 20. Good X, 13, 21, 25. Those are not super chill numbers, but fine. And these different spots, point P, point R, point Q. Things I already know before I'm reading any part of the question. I know that point P and R are good. I know that point Q is bad. Point Q is in a recession. Point Q is underproducing relative to where they should be. They should be up here at P, where it's 13 and 30. At Q, they're at 13 and 20. That's bad. They're producing less of good Y than they can. That's not what we want. Now, this question asks something separate. It asks about opportunity costs. The idea of, hey, the opportunity cost, it's asking how many of these are true and false is the idea. How many of these statements are true. So the opportunity cost of moving from point P to point R. All of that's really asking is, by going from point P to point R, what am I giving up? Well, P to R, I gained 8 of X. That's not the cost. That's benefit. That's good. I gave up 10. Yeah, that checks out. I gave up 10 units of Y. That is correct. So I know that part 1 is true. Check mark on that. Actually, let me grab my pen thing so I can mark on this. I like drawing on it. And there we go. So that one, check mark. I know that's true. Next one, from R to P. So starting here, going here, it says that it's 8 units of X. Like, but I just thought it was 10 units of Y. Direction matters. If I'm starting off at point R and I'm moving to point P, what am I giving up? I'm actually giving up X. Giving up some amount of good X. In this case, it is actually 8 units because 21 minus 13 is 8. I gain 10Y going from R to P. I give up 8 of X. So direction matters when it comes to production possibilities curves. Moving down the curve versus moving up the curve. Because the idea is, what are you losing? Well, going from P to R, I am losing some of my Y value. Going from R to P, I am losing some of my X value. Careful. Last one. Opportunity cost of going from Q to R is 0 units of Y. Well, I'm at Q and then I moved to R. I gained 8 of X. I didn't give up anything. That's weird, but that's correct. The reason why you're not giving up anything there is that's why being at Q is bad. The point of Q being a bad spot to be at is that you actually have the resources. If you're in this situation, if you're below full employment, it doesn't mean you don't have the resources. It means you're not using them. Like us being in a recession right now is bad, not just because like pandemic stuff, that medical stuff is obviously bad, but from an economic standpoint, it's bad because we have people who can work. We have businesses that would like to be open and industries that should be operational right now that are not. Cool. So we should be at R, but we're at Q. Moving from Q to R doesn't actually technically cost us because we already have the resources to get out of it. We have them. We're just not there yet. So the answer for this one is all of them. 1, 2, and 3. All of them are good. They're all correct answers. Second one. This is the big brain one. This is the higher level PPC question that I mentioned earlier. Let me move my camera so you can read the actual question itself. Oh, Archer's off camera. I can move back into the center of the frame. Squeak desk. Okay. Assume an economy produces 2 goods, capital goods and consumer goods. This is the high level one where they, instead of saying that it's 2 random goods, like, toilet paper and computers, which appreciate the suggestion, guys. Those were good combinations of rando things. They mention that they're consumer goods and capital goods, which are not goods, but types of goods. Consumer goods are goods that are used up, eaten. It's like food, where it's eaten and gone. Capital goods are goods that are used to make other goods. Technology is your most obvious example of that. So the question states, if the production of capital goods increases right now, what will happen to the current and future PPC for consumer goods and capital goods? The reason why I'm saying this is a higher level question, guys, is that this is kind of a long run question. It's not, but it's built around the same principle. So if you're like, oh, sweet God, it's like, So I'm going to make this graph to sort of help us deal with it. So we got consumer goods and capital goods. Okay. So it says the production of capital goods increases in the current period. It doesn't say that our ability to make them is changing. It's just saying that our current amount of them that we're making has increased. What they mean by that is I'm not shifting the curve in the short run, in the current version. I'm moving up it, like that. Like if I was at the middle, where we were like splitting it even Stevens, just going right down the middle, cool. It says that I'm making more capital goods now, so I would move like that, up the curve, which means I am now making, if you imagine X and Y values here on like X and Y coordinates, this point now has more capital goods. So the first thing is, it is a movement along the current PPC. So A, B, and E all work just fine. Now when they say the future PPC, they mean like, okay, we're making more capital goods. What'll that mean for us eventually? And what this is tied to is an actual thing when it comes to our long run parts of the graph for the course, like the long run aggregate supply stuff, which terrifying to realize that they're connecting the production possibilities curve to the long run aggregate supply stuff, but you can because full employment. What type of good are subscription services? They're services, not goods. That's the trick. You said it in your question, Stephen. They are services, not goods. It doesn't cover every type of thing in your economy. It just covers things that are being produced. So those are services. So you're fine. Sorry, sidetracked by a question by Stephen. Which is fine. That's a good question. When we're talking consumer versus capital, though, making more capital goods will improve the amount of capital within your economy, meaning you've got more tools, tech, machinery, things that help you produce things, not in the past or the present, but also in the future. Like if I have a bunch more tools and tech, then I can make a bunch of stuff forever. So here's what happens for my long run, like my future PPC is what they're saying, is my future PPC would be bigger. So like that initial green shift is my like initial thing. This is my short thing. And my future PPC would be this second one. Because if I can't, it's like a mirror thing, guys. So like I'm having a hard time like, oh my God, why can't I figure this out? Here we go. That is the future PPC. It would be bigger because if I've got more capital goods, if I start making more and more capital goods, I can use those to make everything. Like I make better machines. We use machines to make consumer goods. We use machines to process our food and make it easier to package and save us time and energy and all that stuff. So what would happen here is that it's a movement along my current PPC and a rightward shift of my future PPC. That present day, cool, I'm making more capital goods. That's great. Good for us. Love that. Long term, making more capital goods helps us produce more of everything in the future. It's the idea that capital stock is improving. Like technically, doing this increases long run aggregate supply. It makes full employment fuller, makes full employment bigger, makes my natural rate of output larger. It is the best thing for long-term economic growth. So countries that prioritize capital goods tend to have a larger long-term economic growth plan than countries that focus on consumer goods. That's about as big brain as you can get off of a production possibilities curve, as a heads up. That's about as like hard as it can get. So if you're like, yeah, I tried to find like the hardest thing I could find when it comes to PPCs. How are we doing on time? 10 minutes. I talk a lot. I'm so sorry. All right, 3. Oh, there's not a graph here. It's a table. Ugh. All right, so I got production points A, B, C, D, E, F. I make 20 shirts, 0 chairs, 16 shirts, 1 chair, 12 shirts, 2 chairs, 8 shirts, 3 chairs, 4 shirts, 4 chairs, 0 shirts, 5 chairs. Okay. If you drew this graph, would it be a straight line or a curve? That's the question. It's not what the question's asking. The question's asking the opportunity cost of producing a chair. Is it 0, constant, increasing, decreasing, or I don't know? If I'm imagining drawing this graph, I see that there are constant increments on this side by 1, and I see that there are constant increments on this side by 4. I'm seeing constant and constant. It's constant. This, even though shirts and chairs are not the same good, made from completely different things, College Board hates you, just hates you, and is like, hey, I know you've learned this whole time that constant happens if they're 2 similar goods. What if we just made the math happen that way anyway? So in this case, it is constant opportunity cost. Not because the goods are similar or different. They don't care about that in this one because... Why? But because the math tells me. It goes down by 4, 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 down by 1, 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 constant. If I were to graph it, it'd be linear. It's constant opportunity cost. As a heads up, you couldn't have decreasing opportunity cost. That would end up being like a bent-in curve, which isn't possible. Indeterminate doesn't make sense because there are numbers here. I can figure it out. And it ain't 0 because they don't change by 0. They change. So you should really only ever pick between constant and increasing. And since it isn't varying, it's 4, 4, 4, 4, 1, 1, 1, 1. It's constant. This one. This one is one of the harder ones we use in class every year. I've used this every year I've taught AP Economics. We've got missiles and steel as my two axes. The question asks, which of the following would cause the PPC curve to shift outward? Which of them is going to increase the maximum amount of missiles and steel I can make? The reason why this one is hard is because of A and B. A says reopening steel plants that had been closed. You're like, well, that would make it so we could make more steel, and if we have more steel, we can make more missiles. And B says rehiring laid off steel workers, and you're like, yeah, I can make more steel and I can make more missiles. The problem with A and B, and this is a classic trap for production possibilities curves, is A and B don't change my maximum. They don't change my max. Because my maximum implies that I'm using all of my resources. If I'm reopening steel plants that had been closed or hiring laid off steel workers, that means I wasn't on the line before. I was inside the curve. I was like there. And now these are places that had been closed and now they're back being open, and people who had been laid off but are now back to work. That didn't raise my max. That got me back to my max. So A and B do this. They move you from inside the curve to on it. They get you from below your maximum back to your maximum. It's tricky because you're like, that wouldn't help me produce more. It's like, yes, but it doesn't make your maximum higher. It just gets you back to it. What I would have gotten down to if I was one of you guys and I saw this question on test is I would have been A and B I don't think are different, which means it can't be A or B. C and D say using machinery for missiles instead of steel or steels instead of missile. That's like the drawing I did from the last question where it was like moving along the curve here. You can see my ring light. Moving along the curve like that. That spot right there. Using machinery for missiles instead of steel would have been like this movement. For steels instead of missiles would have been like that movement. And none of these are getting the curve to shift out. Last one says, developing a more efficient steel making process. Can I make more steel? Yes. Does this change my maximum amount of steel I can make? Yes, I can make steel more efficiently. That affects the whole thing. That raises the ceiling for me from a steel making standpoint, which if you wanted to say that your missiles were made from like copper as opposed to steel, fine. But that's a terrible drawing. Let's fix that. Yeah, okay. It's jagged, but would work. It's still shifting outward if it shifts outward only in one axis. I would say this shifts the whole thing, but even if you wanted to argue that it doesn't shift the whole thing, it only shifts steel, it still shifts it outward. So E is the answer to that one. It's a question I used in class on like every test forever. I always use that question because I want to see who picks E versus who picks A and B. Kids who are in a rush tend to pick A and B because they don't want to read all the way to E. All right, last one. This is the last production possibilities curve question, I think. I think the next one is, yes, next one is terms of trade and comparative advantage. I'll probably go to 5:45 with this. Apologies, guys, that this went longer than before. I was also trying to set up stuff that I haven't set up before. My fault. I'll use a few less questions next time. So we've got the PPC. We've got all these combinations this country can produce. The best combination they can produce. Trick. It's a trick question. We do this in economics a lot of the time. The reason why it's trick is because of the word best. 95 and 1 is here. 85 and 2 is here. 70 and 3 is there. 40 and 4 is there. They're all on the curve. That means they're all efficient. They're all good. None of them are bad. Most people pick C on this because they're like, that's right in the middle. That splits the difference. It's your safest bet. But this could very easily be a place where coats aren't needed, or belts aren't as necessary. I don't know anything about this place. I cannot tell you what's best for them. Indeterminate. If you see indeterminate as an answer choice, you really do have to weigh it as a, is this a thing I can actually tell based on the information that I'm given? Because indeterminate always just means I don't have enough information to figure this out. So if you see indeterminate as an answer choice, check. Make sure that, wait a minute, can I know this? Is C better than E here? Because C says this. Do I know that's best, or am I just assuming it's best because it's in the middle? If this is a place where they don't wear coats, which you're like, that's stupid, McRitchie. It's like, it's saying they could only make belts and coats. The graph itself is kind of stupid. So don't like criticize, like, that's a stupid way to think. It's like, the graph itself is dumb, so just roll with it when it comes to that. All right. Comparative advantage, absolute advantage time. Here we go. If you guys have questions as I'm working through a question of like, what the hell did you do to figure that out? What's going on? Ask, chat people. It's all about you. And if you're watching this later and you have a question, comment it, please. That way I can help you. All right. We've got autos and computers. You could say cars. Question. You're so stupid, so dumb. Okay. So home nation and foreign nation. That feels problematic. Just call them countries. We've got cars. We got computers. Okay, great. It looks like home nation and foreign nation make the same amount of cars. Great, good for them. So they're dead even there. I see that home nation makes 100 computers and foreign nation makes 50 computers. All right, who's better at making computers? Home nation. They have the absolute advantage in computer. Oh, look, that's the answer. Whenever I see questions where I'm looking at the answer to it, because I always like scan everything before I like actually solve it. I'm like, all right, numbers. What am I doing? Absolute comparative advantage. Roll my eyes. Great. I see that absolute advantage is in answer choices. I'm going to make sure it's not that first because that saves me a lot of time. And I'm like, wait a minute. Okay, so neither has the absolute advantage in autos. They're the same there, so they're dead even. And then I look and like, oh, wait. Home nation can make more computers than foreign nation. So that? Done. I don't have to do anything else, actually. I don't have to solve for comparative if I know home nation has absolute. Absolute's faster, easier. Save yourself time and energy. Make your life easier, best you can. Okay. Oh, I need to make this one a little bit bigger because that table is small. Can I make that table any bigger? That did not help the table at all. That's annoying. Okay. So Brazil and Peru make coffee and wheat using labor as their only input. Table shows how much labor hours are required to make a unit of wheat and a unit of coffee. I put this question here because this is not an output problem. This is an input problem. What they mean by this is that how many hours does it take them to make a thing of coffee? How many hours does it take them to make a thing of wheat? Okay. So I'm going to use colors for this. How many hours does it take them to make a thing of coffee? Brazil takes them 12 hours. Peru takes them 6 hours. Who's better at making coffee? Peru. It takes them less time. So I'd say Peru has the absolute advantage in it. And then for wheat, dead even. So I'm like, okay, absolute advantage goes to Peru in coffee. Is that an answer? Peru has absolute advantage in wheat. No! Dang it. Brazil's got an absolute advantage in wheat. No! Peru's comparative. Ow, I gotta do math. That's my reaction. Okay. So I got to do my opportunity costs. Now there's your example, those of you that were hoping for an example of an input problem in this video. Here's an example of me solving an input problem. It's OGU. I'm using my mouse for this, so it's going to be bad handwriting. It already is for me, but it's going to be worse. Other goes under for my opportunity cost here. So the opportunity cost of 1 coffee is other goes under for under 12. So 12 over 4, that's 3. Which means that would be a third, because again, they are reciprocals, that never changes. That's a third, that's a 3. And then for this one, opportunity cost of 1 coffee is other goes under, that's 6 over 4, which is 3 over 2. With this, there is a lot of simplifying fractions a lot of the time. If you would like to convert it to a whole number or a decimal, you can. I keep it as fractions, because there are reciprocals. So like if that's 3 over 2, this is 2 over 3. Tends to be easier for me. And then comparative advantage is still who has the lower opportunity cost. So I'm looking at this. I'm looking at 3 and 3 over 2, and that's smaller. So Peru's got it in coffee, and a third is less than 2/3. So Brazil's got it in wheat. So Peru comparative advantage in wheat, nope. Peru comparative advantage in coffee, opportunity cost of 1 coffee is 3 over 2, check. Which, as a heads up, this whole like, wait, they have comparative advantage in coffee, but you said it's 3/2 wheat. Why is it not OGO, Judson? Because it is an input problem. It is labor hours per unit of coffee, meaning the numbers in the table are the number of resources. If I'm looking at the table, I would want the person who uses the fewest resources. So because it's an input problem, I got to do OGO, or OGU, sorry. So OGO is for output, OGU is for input. This is an input problem. In terms of, like, what was I thinking? Oh, how I knew it was coffee. That's why I do it in the table. Because and that's why I use this 1 coffee thing. Because what I'm doing in this is I'm figuring out the opportunity cost of 1 coffee is 3 over 2 wheat, meaning they have the comparative advantage in producing coffee. It costs them less wheat per coffee. We're talking about how much coffee they're making. So it is D here. It's always weird to explain the math part of this because comparative advantage is so weird a lot of the time. If you wanted to think about it like, why is OGU a thing in general? Well, if it took Brazil 12 hours to make a thing of coffee and 4 hours to make a thing of wheat, in the amount of time to make 1 coffee, they could have made 3 wheat. Right? It takes them 12 hours to make a thing of coffee. It takes them 4 hours to make a thing of wheat. And the amount of time they take to make 1 coffee, they could have made 3 wheat. That's why you do OGU, is to get like that logic to happen for your math. If you did OGO, it wouldn't make sense. So for this one, in case, again, you didn't hear me say it, it is D. Peru's got a comparative advantage in coffee. And again, if you have questions, chat. I think, again, it's like a 30-second delay between me and the chat. So if you type something and I'm not responding to it immediately, you're not bad. I'm not seeing it yet. My favorite question in the entirety of the AP exam. If you've stuck around for this, you get to see what I think is probably the stupidest question College Board has ever asked on any AP exam I've ever seen in my entire life. I'm taking a lot of AP exams. All right. I don't know if I used this in my class this year. I might have used it in one of the practices. I don't think I did, though. So, here's the question. Read it along with me. Mary Jane is a lawyer who can earn $150 per hour in her law practice. Okay, good for her. She is also an excellent carpenter who can build cabinets 3 times as fast as the best carpenter whose hourly wage is $20 per hour. Which of the following is the correct economic statement? Okay. All right, so this lady makes $150 an hour as a lawyer. She's also 3 times better than the world's best carpenter, who only makes $20 an hour, which feels like he's getting super underpaid if he's making that amount. Which the following is the correct economic statement. This question gave me like a fever dream. The first time I read it, I was just like, what's happening? I was just like, what do they want me to do here? And then I read the answers, I'm like, comparative advantage, what's going on? All right. So, this is a question that tests your ability to just read and eliminate answer choices. This is barely a question about absolute comparative advantage. So A is she has a comparative advantage in law, so she should specialize in law, just be a lawyer, and hire a carpenter to make her cabinets. Maybe. Now, what you should realize there is, like, when they're saying she has a comparative advantage in law, means in the context of this scenario, her opportunity cost of being a lawyer is lower than her opportunity cost of being a carpenter. If she chooses to pursue law, what she's giving up is carpentry, which makes her $20 an hour if she does it. Or maybe $60 an hour if you do this 3 times thing and she gets paid fairly. If she chooses to become a carpenter, her opportunity cost is the $150 an hour she'd be making as a lawyer. So she does actually have a comparative advantage in law. That is an accurate statement. It feels crazy weird to think about it like that, but that's technically accurate. That you don't have to think too hard about that. For this question, if you progressively read the rest of the answers, they get progressively more insane and impossible. So B says Mary Jane has an absolute and comparative advantage in both law and carpentry, so she should just do both, is kind of the summation there. I mentioned this before. The reason why this one is wrong is because you cannot have a comparative advantage in both. It can't cost her less to do one and then also cost her less to do the other if we're talking in reference to each other. If it costs her less to be a lawyer than a carpenter, then it doesn't also cost her less to be a carpenter than a lawyer. It would have to be the opposite. So it can't be B from like a rules of logic standpoint. C, Mary Jane is 3 times faster than any carpenter, so she should give up on her law practice to become a carpenter because pride? I don't know. There's not a good economic reason for that because she's going to get underpaid based on the scenario. So like, she could be the greatest carpenter in the world and make a lot less. D, when carpenters work for lawyers, they should charge $150 per hour instead of $20. What is going on? And then E, categorically insane. Because Mary Jane is an excellent carpenter, when the best carpenter works for Mary Jane, he can only charge 1/3, or $6.67 an hour, which is below the federal minimum wage. Oh my god. Okay. I want to put this in here because it is fun to just read it and just like actively mock the question super hard. Yeah. A is the answer. It's weird that she should hire her own carpenter because she should probably just do it in her free time. But B is impossible based on how comparative advantage works. C is based on pride, which is not an economics thing. D doesn't make any sense because this lady makes $100 an hour. And then E, what's going on? I don't know. I know I spent a lot of time on this question. This is just to like make you feel better. The AP exam is also stupid. Okay, I might skip these two because there is a term straight problem that is in the FRQs. So I'm going to go to the FRQs now to save us some time. I'll come back to 9 and 10 so the people who are watching the video later can see me do those questions. But for those of you that have been here the whole time, I know a lot of you guys have. Thank you so much. I've gone over time. That's on me. So I'm not going to answer the entirety of these FRQs. I'm just going to answer the parts that are relevant to what we've been talking about today. So this question has a lot to do with like aggregate demand and aggregate supply and a whole bunch of stuff. I'm not going to go through those parts. I am only going to talk about B, which is explain how an increase in net investment will affect the country's production possibilities curve shown below. This is tied right to the multiple choice question we had earlier, the complicated one, which is to say net investment meaning investment spending. That's what they're talking about here. If investment spending is going up, how would that affect your PPC? Well, investment spending is spending by businesses usually on things that help them produce stuff, aka capital. So this is just like the higher level PPC question on the multiple choice section where this country is buying more capital, which means their PPC should increase. If you're buying more and more capital goods, that helps your ability to produce things permanently. So you should see the PPC shift outward for this one. It doesn't say to draw it, it says to explain it. You would explain it as the PPC should shift outward here because the increase in investment will lead to an increase in capital or capital stock, which will allow this country's maximum level of production to rise. That's the idea. Again, that's one of the harder things for the PPC, I think. Okay, 12. This one is a production possibility. I can do production possibilities curve here. I can do comparative advantage here, so I can knock out both with this question. We've got country A and B produce 2 products, hammocks and looms. A makes 60 hammocks, 40 looms. B makes 40 hammocks, 2 looms. What is the opportunity cost to produce a loom in terms of hammocks in country A? Okay, so the opportunity cost of 1 loom for them is, this is total amount of thing being made, so they're talking output. Output is other goes over. So if I'm trying to find the opportunity cost of one loom, I take the other number, 60. It goes over this number, 40. 6 over 4, which is 3 over 2. 3/2 of a hammock, 1.5 hammocks is the answer to that. Which country, if either, has the comparative advantage in looms? Okay, so I need to know what B's opportunity cost of a loom is. Opportunity cost of one loom is other goes over 2 hammocks. Remember, it's lower opportunity cost. 3 over 2 is less than 2, so that would be country A. Explain would be because they have a lower opportunity cost. Here we go. Internationally. If one loom is traded for 1.75 hammocks, who would benefit? A, B, both, neither. Doesn't say to explain it. Thank you, God. Love when you don't say to explain it. Okay. They give me the trade. One loom for 1.75 hammocks. In order for it to be mutually beneficial, what does it have to do? It has to fall in between their opportunity costs. All right. 1.75 is less than 2, greater than 3 over 2. Good for both. Don't have to explain it. I can for you if you want. The basic idea here is country B, because they're the ones trading away the hammocks, because they would have the comparative advantage of hammocks, used to give up 2 for 1, is now giving up 1.75 for 1. Good deal. Country A used to give up 1 for 3 used to give up 1 for 1.5, is now giving up 1 for 1.75. That's also better. Both sides benefit. This D thing is like one of the other higher level PPC things that's worth mentioning. This is the trade bit from the QQTT. Can a country produce beyond its PPC? Debatable in how you want to phrase this. There's more than one way to answer this part. Technically, no. They don't have the productive capacity. The PPC is their kind of maximum. You could argue yes, but they would go unsustainable. They would be using resources in a way that is not going to allow them to do it for a long time, or they would be in like an inflationary gap. That could work if you explained it that way. Can they consume beyond their PPC? Yes, because of trade. Because of trade, you can consume beyond your PPC. You can consume more than your country would produce if you get it from somebody else. Right? You didn't produce it, but you are consuming it. So, yes, you can. So trade is the reason why you can consume beyond it. You can't produce, because even if you're trading, you're not making more. It's just you're getting more, because you're trading for it and getting it from somebody else. So there's the idea here. These are a little bit higher level PPC things where it's like, wait, can they? It's like, technically, no. You could situationally say yes if you wanted to. I don't know if you should, but you can. And then can you consume beyond it? Yes, because of trade. Because of trade, you absolutely can consume beyond it. We do that all the time. And then 13. Do I need to do this one? I don't think so. It's not repeating. It's the same stuff as 12. It's not anything different from 12. I'll go back to 9 and 10 real quick, which are still terms of trade problems. So if you're here for the terms of trade, you're going to get some extra practice here. If you weren't, you're good. But I'm going through these problems now. So alpha, beta, steel, grain, awesome. Alpha should find it advantageous to export and import something. Okay, they're talking trade. Alpha is 30 and 30. I'm just going to do a table on my thing. Alpha, beta, grain, and steel. 30, 30, 10, 20. So I'm just setting it up as a table on my little thing. Opportunity costs for alpha are 1 and 1. 1 for 1 the whole way down. Opportunity costs for beta are, opportunity cost of 1 grain is 2 steel. Opportunity cost of 1 steel is a half a thing of grain. So I'm holding this up so we can see what's happening. The opportunity cost, the comparative advantage in grain belongs to country alpha, because 1 is less than 2. The comparative advantage for steel belongs to country B. So when they're saying exporting and importing, what they're really asking is who should be making what. And based on comparative advantage, which is again what we're talking about here for who's making what, based on comparative advantage, country alpha, A, should be making grain, which would mean that they would, if they're trading, be exporting the grain and importing the steel. They won't be doing both. They would never be doing both. Even though they make more, it is not based on that. It is based on comparative advantage. And again, you cannot have a comparative advantage in both. This last one, which is a term of trade suggestion, would not be a good one. 1 grain for 1 steel, 1 grain for 2 steel, 1 grain for 0.5 steel. 0.5 is not between 1 and 2. That would not be good. The answer is simply A, and this is tied to the exact same thing, so I don't have to erase anything. It's the same question, just part 2. It's asking which would be a mutually beneficial trade. Okay, well, they're all in terms of 1 grain, so I'm looking at these two. It has to be between these two for it to be good. 3 is not between those two. 1.5 is done. Terms of trade can be fast. It can be. Once you get the hang of it and you're like, okay, terms of trade, it's in between the opportunity cost. Here's the opportunity cost. Between those two numbers, done. Got it. All right. That went longer than I was hoping. I am so sorry, everybody who was watching. I told you it would be an hour, and I lied. I'm sorry about that. But that is it for PPC, Comparative Advantage, Terms of Trade. That should be a good enough review that if you are watching this now, or if you watch this leading into the AP exam, you should be like, oh, okay. I would recommend, if you want to go back to this video later on, or go look at another video, or if you're in my class, pull up a practice, make up some numbers, use numbers that are dividable relatively easily, and test yourself with comparative advantage, absolute advantage, terms of trade. Or just practice it a couple of times, especially leading into the AP exam, because it's a thing you forget how to do very quickly, because it's not that difficult. It just messes you up. Chloe, you finished brownies. Do I want some? If you bring some tomorrow, Chloe, that would be great. I would love that, yeah. I love brownies. So do appreciate that. Yeah, if you brought them, that'd be sick. But I think that is just about it that I needed to hit on. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask them. But if you do not, thank you very much for watching. Greatly do appreciate it, guys. Having people in the chat does help me a lot. I'll try to be better about my timing and not have it run 15 to 20 minutes late. That sucks for you guys. I'm sorry. Didn't mean for it to run this long. It's helpful for review purposes, but I don't want to hold you guys for an hour and a half of your free time. But thank you guys very much for watching. The next one will be next Tuesday. Same time, shouldn't be as long, and it's just regular old supply and demand. Meaning we're talking about like quantity demanded, quantity supplied, shortages and surpluses. Do you get a bonus point? No, Chloe, that would be a terrible thing for me to incentivize, because then you would bring me 20 and ask for 20 bonus points, and then the floodgates just open in terms of people bringing me food as a means of just straight up bribing me. Because I am weak. I love food. I cannot do it. Yes, Steven, you are right. That is what's in the next video, although I don't know if I will say it in the video. I have done a good job of not recording that anywhere, so I can't get in trouble for it. He's referencing how I abbreviate the supply shifters, which those of you in my class know this. Those of you that are not in my class don't know what he's talking about, which is great. Okay, but if you have any further questions, feel free to ask. I'm about to end the stream here, but thank you guys very much for watching. Archer, do you want to show up on camera now or no? Archer? Archer? Come here. He is not social today. Wow, what a baby. He knows I'm going to pick him up. He's so smart. All right. That is it. Oh, yeah, he's on camera. Look at that. Barbara, come on. Yes. Oh, no. Oh, well, actually, he wants to bring a toy. Oh, that bone is stuck in the... Okay. That's it. Thank you guys very much for watching. Really do appreciate that. Awkward ending, but